with a 50% housing price crash. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.heise here and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee and I hope you're having a good weekend. Now there's been a lot of discussion over the last few years on this channel about the property sector. We've been looking at a lot of news articles, a lot of pieces discussing a property price correction. There have been a lot of people hoping for a property price correction, even people who are in property, not because they're masochistic and want to lose money on their investment, mainly because they're concerned at the next generation trying to jump into property. My issue is that it's a sign that, well, we're investing all of our resources and wealth into getting into property, and what other opportunities are there? What is the opportunity cost to our nation of this obsession with property? What's the opportunity cost of missed people being born, of people having families much later, or even avoiding having them at all? Businesses that could have been created. So it's concerning from that regards. Now, many people hope for a correction, but we haven't really seen one. If anything, the property has proven quite robust. We've got Evergrande tittering over in China. They're, again, missing payments on their bonds, and some people suspect that could be the new Lehman Brothers. Now, it's certainly going to have an impact in China. It'll certainly have an impact through industries here in Australia that are exposed to China. But do you think it's going to affect our property? Could the opposite happen? I mean, look at the world, everyone. Could the opposite happen? Could Australian property be seen even more so as a safe haven? So I thought we'd have a look at this article. This is from the BBC News, and it's discussing the UK housing market, everyone. Because, well, we're not alone in this mess. If we have a look here, we can see this is house price indices around the world. From 2017, New Zealand are leading the pack. US, Canada, Australia were up there, but the UK, Sweden and Norway, everyone is surging. Is there really a safe haven from this? Or are people diving into property as a safe haven? Is that what we're seeing? I don't think people in Australia are going to dive into precious metals or even crypto. The majority of them aren't. Yesterday, I was talking to a family member who they'd sold a property on the river, one of their relatives, and they'd put it all in another house, and then another house next to it. And I'm thinking, God, wow, why would you put all that money into just one property at one location? Wouldn't you diversify it a bit, go into some shares, some real estate investment trusts? And apparently, shares are all just going to collapse. It's all a big con, property all the way. It's a generational thing. It's part of our culture. And you can't blame people if that's all they've known, if that's how they've made all their wealth. Some people, all the money they've made, all their retirement has come from their property, a big chunk of it. So, can you blame them? So let's look at this. Because this chap here is, well, he's in negative equity. Remember negative equity? There's a lot of fear about that as well, but that's continuing to go down. So, in need of modernization in the UK's housing crisis, close up. So we're looking at examples from people's here. So, when Steve's flat was struck by lightning in 2011, he thought all his prayers had been answered. Could he free himself from a property which in just 4 years had become a financial burden? See, that's a sign of desperation if you're hoping a lightning strike will get you out of property issues. I really hoped the insurers would just write off this building and pay off our mortgage, but that didn't happen, he explained. Does that ever happen? The UK property market, much like Steve's lightning strike, is often a matter of fate, subject to forces out of individuals' control. Across the country, there are more than 27 million homes, but many more are needed. In the 30 years to 2021, 3 million fewer properties were built than in the previous 30. The population, however, has increased by more than 9 million. BBC has travelled the country to meet people whose stories are snapshots of the UK's housing crisis, and Steve's in Middlesbrough is one of regret. From the balcony of his one-bed flat, there are glimpses of local landmarks on the horizon. The Town Hall clock, the Tees Transporter Bridge, 14 years after he bought the property, and a decade on from the lightning strike, It is barely worth half of what he paid for it. Half. So there you go. This is the thing with people crashing in property. If there's a big crash in property, are people going to sell? I definitely wish I hadn't bought this place, he said. The electrician, now 35, bought at the end of 2017 for £96,000, when the housing market was peaking ahead of a massive crash and global recession. He's been living at his mum's on a council estate when one day he spotted a sign for a newly built estate where developers were offering to pay purchasers' deposits for them, 5% of the purchase price. Okay, so he didn't have any savings to get in, so he's paying for that deposit, isn't he? They had a show home done up with nice interiors. It was very appealing. It took 25 days from that moment I walked in to being handed the keys, he recalls. It felt great. My mum was very proud to see me wanting to go somewhere in life. As a young single man, the first few years of home ownership were good. But after a while, he met a partner and wanted to sell the flat and move in with her. He discovered, however, that following the GFC, his property was worth £7,000 less than what he paid for it, and he didn't want to sell for a loss. Oh, boy. I mean, I can understand that. That's property. Well, that's not property, that's everything. I mean, sometimes, this is one thing where with the share market, everyone. You know, I've got some shares that I've made a loss on. Okay, but, you know, you can keep that loss. Okay, when I'm going to sell those other shares I made a nice profit on, I'll keep that to offset some of that, to, you know, reduce my tax. So you've got much more flexibility with a portfolio. But there's a higher level of risk as well. But then again, and what's more, he was tied into his mortgage deal, and the penalty for quitting early was £6,000. He decided to rent the flat out rather than lose all that money. Okay, so he's in negative equity in 2021. Now, more than a decade on, Steve is back in the flat on his own. Oh, that's kind of sad. It didn't work out with the girl. His story of negative equity, where the mortgage debt owed on his property is more than its value, is not so common these days. House prices have not taken sharp falls recently and the interest rates are low. So what happened? Something happened here. Did he not pay it off on a decade? How can you not be getting ahead on payments in 10 years, particularly when you're renting it out? Why didn't he just smash it? Come on, he's a Sparky. They earn good coin. They earn bloody good coin. At least they do here in Australia. Just smash it, mate. So, but Steve has other problems too. The Grenfell Tower fire, which in late 2017 killed 72 people in a block of flats in West London, exposed the lethal danger of some types of cladding on blocks of flats, and many residents are now liable to pay for their removal. Ah, no. The cladding on Steve's block is getting reviewed, but he says the freeholder has already started taking money from residents to cover costs, $2,500 or $2,400 per flat. Then there are the services charges. They are now £1,200 a year, more than double they were in 2007. This is the problem with buying an apartment, everyone. There are all these costs associated with it. And if there's a problem on one part of the apartment, you have to pay up for it. We've seen it happen here in Australia, guys. We've talked about it on this channel again and again. Mascot Towers, guys. Opal Towers, everyone. There's so many. I'm sorry, it's been a while actually. I haven't had one to talk about for a couple of months. What's going on? New South Wales finally cleaning up their construction game. So, more than 4.5 million people own leasehold properties in England, and increased ground rents and service charges have left many of them out of pocket. From 2022, the government wants owners of new built flats to be charged zero ground rent. But that won't help Steve. He doubts he'll be able to sell anytime soon. One similar flat sold recently for £53,000, two for only £39,000. I think people in debt have handed keys back to mortgage companies, which have sold the properties forever for whatever they could get. Okay, so this is he's in a unique situation here. He's in a property no one wants. The leasehold thing definitely plays a big part. Now everyone is aware of what owning a leasehold property means. So, Steve bought at the top of the frenzy 2005-2007 boom, but has been unlucky on multiple fronts, said Professor Paul Cheshire for the Centre of Economic Performance at the London School of Economics. The British housing market is notorious for booms and busts, but the cheaper sector in Middlesbrough was one of the most volatile of all. Prices went up 50% in just 2 years and then fell off a cliff, says the professor, with Steve buying at the very top of that boom, having been drawn in by the developer's offer to pay his deposit. Is this the lesson here? If you don't even have enough for a deposit, are you ready to go in the market? Or is that a sign the market's overheating? And what does that tell us about the 1% deposits that are being offered by the Australian government for single parents? Or the 5% deposits that are being backed up by the government? What does that tell us, guys? So, he then got caught in a market collapse and was lumbered with an escalating service charge. And in the years after the worst financial crisis, Middlesbrough's housing market has not seen strong rising demand, said Professor Cheshire. So prices haven't risen as fast in other parts of the country, or as in other parts of the country. The reality of home ownership for Steve has been nothing like he imagined. His dream became a nightmare. While for a young couple in West Wales, they can only fantasize about buying a property of their own. So life in a caravan. So today they're having, here in Brisbane, there's actually a tiny home roadshow. Today and tomorrow. I think it's sold out. We were tempted to have a look at it, but it's a bit of a hike getting up there. And the problem with tiny homes is they're just caravans, guys. That's what they are. Well, that's not what the problem is. That's what they are. They're caravans. So they use that to get around all of the building code legislation on normal homes. So if we want cheaper housing, maybe we need to look at addressing the building code legislation. But the problem is a lot of those rules are for health and safety. They're for accessibility. You know, these tiny homes, you're not going to be able to age in place. So you could probably live in a caravan a bit better, maybe. Probably not. So, home for Rachel and Angus is a £4,000 a month rented static caravan on a farm near the pretty village of Solva, not far from St. David's. They have now struggled through one cold winter. Ooh, yeah, that's something, okay, yes, a European winter, oh boy. I mean, I've mentioned before, I've had colleagues I've worked with that have come over from Germany and they've been colder here in Australia than in the middle of Berlin in winter because our houses are designed just so for a tropical climate. The walls are only 5mm thick, but that caravan beats that, said Angus. We didn't spend much time in the bedroom in winter. It gets damp. We slept in the living area with a gas burner on. Rachel, who grew up locally, is a housing officer. Angus works with young people in residential care. Any mortgage Rachel and Angus could get wouldn't be big enough to allow them to buy a property in the area. The couple say they have friends living locally in tents and yurts because finding a house, flat, or even caravan to rent long term at an affordable rate is so difficult. It's because Solva is so popular with second home owners, says Rachel. Well, this is what happens when an area gets gentrified. This is what's going to happen. We're seeing it happen in, where is it? Hang on, I'll bring it up here. This is what's happening in Murwillumbah in New South Wales. I always call it Mobar. And you can see here, look at that property increase. Look at the increase in property prices. I'll just go full screen so I can see what we're looking at here. From September, 640 grand, all houses, to, what? There you go, guys. 895,000. Now a local working a normal job is going to struggle. It's going to struggle. And that's demand from people coming interstate. Regionally, we're going to see that. I wonder if we'll have people living in tents and yurts and those type of things in parts of Australia. Well, council would probably move you on here. They wouldn't let you. I had one mate at uni. He built a yurt and lived in it. I think he really enjoyed it too. So, they can make so much money with Airbnb and holiday lets. We can't compete, said Rachel. At some point, if we can't find anywhere to rent, let alone buy, we're going to move away. Living like this is not sustainable. Yeah, that's the thing. They've got to move. Walking along the Pembrokeshire coast path, Rachel points out a stretch of development land on the edge of Solva. The building plots alone are selling for around £500,000. That's before a brick is laid. Wow. Finished homes with spectacular unspoiled views over the sea would sell for much more. Pembrokeshire's remoteness means it feels like the end of the line, both metaphorically and physically, says Angus. It often feels like we get forgotten about. Well, you can move. There's a place going for £39,000 in the previous example. That's the thing. You've got to move or you've got to earn more. You've been pushed out. Arguments about both the ethics and practicalities of second home ownership have raged in Wales for decades. But Professor Paul Cheshire says the situation is now more acute. The rich have been getting richer relative to the rest of us. So demand for houses in really outstanding locations has increased, and those prices relatively have gone up more than in other areas. But outside the Pembrokeshire Coast National Park, 8 miles away, there are decent houses available for £75,000. Well, then why don't they go there? So this is where they're talking about. So outside of this, they can get cheaper property. Oh, well, okay, they're probably living in... There you go. Well, literally right on the end of Wales. Right on the end of Wales. So, but outside, 8 miles away, you get homes for £75,000. £75,000. So what are we looking at? We're looking at Solva. So there. So they just need to move out of there. Okay, so this is... We've got similar things here in Australia, guys. You know, really nice places that people just can't afford to live in anymore. It's not... Yeah, look at this. I mean, beautiful here. Yeah, there you go. So, in Solva, though, where 3 generations of Rachel's family live and where she would like to stay, there may be some hope. With friends and neighbours, Rachel is now a member of a community land trust. It's a democratic, non-profit organisation with an aim of developing land for the benefit of local people. The trust has helped earmark a local football pitch owned by Pembrokeshire City Council as a site for 18 new affordable homes, which will be built by a home association. The new properties, ranging from 1 to 3 bedrooms, would be funded using money from a council tax levied on second homes in the area. Okay. And then how many of them will want to sell it for all the money? Or is this just public housing? Extra taxes on holiday homes. There are still hurdles to overcome. For example, COVID-19 has increased the price of materials, said Rachel. But we remain hopeful we've overcome the biggest ones now. There will be a strict application process, and there's no guarantee she and Angus will get one of the homes. They know they must be patient. More than 200 miles away in London, that's something NHS worker Daniel knows about. She's been saving for 11 years for a deposit to get on the housing ladder. Okay. Well, what do you reckon with this couple? They just need to move. Okay, they need to move. That's it. They want to change the rules. They're being gentrified out of a nice location. They get a house for 75 grand, 8 kilometers away, 8 miles away. Why don't you live there and then drive in, rather than living in a caravan, and save up some money, get capital growth there, then buy back in or invest in something else? So, okay, I mean, this is the thing. Is this a sense of entitlement, wanting to live in an area like this just because your parents did? Guys, is that what it is? Okay, because back then it would have been much more remote. You wouldn't have access to the same service and technologies that you have now, and now you do. So that's why things change, everyone. So back home with mum. Oh wait, is this an Australian story? After finishing university, she moved back in with her mum in Tooting. She's now 32 and has a healthy sum banked away. But Rachel, like Rachel and Angus, her salary just isn't big enough to get the mortgage she'd need to buy locally where she was brought up. Well, I mean, 32, yeah, should be, maybe married and in a couple. 32, you should already be a mother. Or am I outdated? Am I outdated now, guys? Because I'm 40. Have I evolved into boomer mode? Southwest London has my heart, but I'm looking across London, says Danielle. Coming from a black background, I would like a diverse community. One-bedroom flats in Tooting are priced upwards of £260,000. Houses like Lydia's, Danielle's mum, sell for more than £700,000. Danielle says she doesn't want to rent privately because it would feel like she was lining someone else's pocket. She's also skeptical of schemes aimed at helping key workers and first home buyers like her. Shared ownership would mean a housing association would still own a portion of her property's equity, and a government help to buy loan of up to 40% of her purchase price wouldn't help her get a mortgage based on her NHS salary, she says. Like generations before her, Danielle wants to be a homeowner. Yes, but generations before her, we're not at a point anymore where one person can easily buy a home on a normal income. You know, the time where you'd have one breadwinner in a family supporting the whole family, that's over. You know, that doesn't exist anymore. The market has adjusted to couples working. That's just the reality of it, guys. Kind of sucks, but there you go. So she wants to be a homeowner. Her grandparents arrived from the Caribbean and bought their 3-bedroom house in Battersea. Her mum, Lydia, first made it into a property ladder when she bought her council flat at a discount under the right to buy scheme. Okay, so artificially cheaper property then. I feel real frustrated for Danielle. So, right to artificially frustrate cheaper property, and now it's worth £700,000. Well, mum needs to sell it and then, you know, help her daughter buy a property, move somewhere smaller. We can't have that, can we? I feel really frustrated for Danielle, and there are times when I don't fully understand it and she gets upset with me, says Lydia. Well, because you got a boomer privilege from a previous generation. I mean, come on. Oh. Sorry, boomers. The desire to own a home is now etched in the British psyche. But for many of Danielle's generation, it's an increasingly vain hope. Though no fault of their own, both Tooting and Battersea are in the London borough of Wadesworth, which is now the 4th least affordable local authority in England and Wales in which to buy a home. Parts of London's housing supply and demand problems, said Professor Cheshire, is lack of space. There is always opposition to new homes. There you go, they're not in my backyard crowd. And look at the bloody planning requirements from Prince Charles, what he's backing, all of that stuff. Whether you want to build high, there are height controls all over London, or whether build outwards on a few acres of greenbelt. Just before the outbreak of World War II, the greenbelt was introduced to encircle London with a narrow girdle of publicly owned land and accessible open space. In 1955, the greenbelt was much bigger, 25 times bigger, and the government stated that approval for urban development on such land should not be given except in very special circumstances. The protective ring now stretches in places 35 miles from Greater London boundary. Building on it is almost impossible and seldom without controversy, said Professor Cheshire. And it is the battles being played out on such land across the home counties that will have a direct impact on the home-buying dreams of Danielle and other young people in London. Well, they don't want people to build on it. Everyone who has a $700,000 house that they got at a special, right to buy dodgy discount doesn't want development on that green belt. They don't want to see these young people being able to afford houses that they could, because then all these property geniuses have lost instant value. Instant value, through their genius investment of getting lucky, Oh. We've got the same thing here in Australia with just difficulty in building. So, Greenbelt invasion. In Kent, in the hamlet of Tudley, near Tunbridge Wells, there are plans for 2,800 new homes. It's Greenbelt land and many residents aren't happy, including Ian and Angela, who live in their converted Oast house for 35 years. Well, yeah. Oh boy. We are surrounded by fields where they grow corn, wheat and barley, plus black currants and pears, said Ian. If the Tudley Green Village development goes ahead, he says, We will be totally surrounded by housing. From rural to urban, it would be sacrilege. Well, buy all the land yourself then, if you want that privilege. Buy it yourself. You've had 35 years of that luxury. This is the problem. The state is artificially limiting access to land. And don't get me wrong, I understand the arguments for it. I've read a pattern language. I'm an architect. I get it from the urban planning perspective. It's lovely. But times are changing, guys. You're getting population density. You can't all be living... What's this? 2 of them living in a house that big. That's probably a privilege of previous generations that we're not going to see in all the same parts. That's going to be something that happens in other parts of the world. All local authorities in England have house building targets, and some are doing better than others in terms of delivery. There is huge demand for housing in this part of Kent, and the LSE's Professor Cheshire believes the local council is simply playing catch-up. Turnbridge Wells Borough Council has been building very few houses over a very long time. As a result, house prices have grown hugely, up 422% since 97. Affordability has deteriorated. Could that be done intentionally? Does that, those of you watching from the UK, does the value of your house and land affect the rates that you pay or the council taxes you have to pay? Because there's an incentive to keep them higher as well. It's almost impossible to provide land for new homes there without releasing some greenbelt land. So much of the area is either greenbelt or designated as an area of outstanding natural beauty, and the latter, he says, you really don't want to build on. Locals fear a 4 or 5-fold increase in Tudley's population to more than 10,000 residents would strain local services. The council says new infrastructure will be planned and carefully delivered to positively transform the borough and avoid the ad hoc approach so often seen with new development. It also says 40% of the homes will be affordable. Yeah, right. As 80% of the market price to rent or buy. Very local roads and services may be upgraded, says Professor Cheshire, but there's no guarantee to upgrade other infrastructure such as wider roads or rail networks in that part of Kent. Well, here's the question. Why is the population of England increased so much over the last few years? Why? What's going on there? I wonder how many of the people living like this are fully supportive of bringing everyone over and opening up the country. As opposed to all the inner city people who are joining these political parties that they don't like, or the opinions that are just not talked about. No. Well, now those of you living in the bloody middle of nowhere, you can cop the impact that people have been feeling. That'll change politics real quick. Ian and Angela are vowing to stay put, but if they wanted to move, Angela says they would be stuck. We can't sell our house. Nobody's going to buy properties around here because we don't know what's going to happen. They moved to Tudley in 86 precisely because the area is so rural. They argue that everyone will benefit from greenbelt staying as it is. But what is the alternative? Well, no, everyone won't. You will. You will, and no one else will. Maybe the few people that live in the town, but people who can't afford, young couples who are living in a caravan and a tent because they can't afford to live somewhere. Or, a nurse who can't even get a property. This really feels like a generational thing, doesn't it? I mean, this is the thing, guys. Here in the UK, they have locked up land. Okay, they have locked up land, and that's why it's costing so much. The challenge is a brownfield. This will be good. Could developing more brownfield sites, land that has previously been built on, be more straightforward? No, not a chance. Not a chance in a million years. They can throw up serious challenges of their own, said Professor Paul Cheshire, often after the first spade is dug. There's always surprises on old industrial land, and there's always bad surprises. Yeah, we saw that here. Look at the triangle of fail that I talk about in all the videos. Look at Mascot Towers. Look at all the subterranean issues in all of that area. You can't even take any of the water out of the ground because there's toxic water going in the aquifer down to Botany Bay. That whole area used to all be industrial land. In southwest Belfast, Katrina, 28, recently moved into a brand new 3-bedroom townhouse built on a brownfield site. They're among the first residents at Black's Gate, which will eventually have a mix of 244 socially rented and affordable privately owned properties. Black's Gate is being built on the site of a former car parts factory. Oh, I mean, there's an example, Sugar Cube down in Sydney, where they took the toxic land out that they dug out for the basements, and instead of taking it away, they just put it on the roads. Last time I checked, the buildings still aren't inhabited. All finished. Guys. It took 5 years for planning permission to be fully approved. Only then could the daunting task to reclaim the land begin. Radius Housing, the company behind the development, admits the site has had its challenges. There was a lot of asbestos, said Anita Cornwall. Yeah, this is not going to lead to a... Trying to reclaim land, toxic land, as opposed to building on some green fields, what do you think is going to be more expensive? So, it was a 10-month job to demolish it and take it away. We had to make sure it was all audited properly to prove it had gone. This part of Belfast needs new housing, but supply issues because of COVID and Brexit mean work at Black's Gate is about 12 to 14 months behind, and says Anita Conway, other sites for new homes are hard to find. You're closed in by mountains to the west, and unfortunately we still have some legacy issues. There are still peace walls in certain areas which are very difficult to develop because of the political situation. But standing on her new balcony, Katrina is pleased to be in her new home, at long last with her partner Jordan. It just felt natural, the right thing to do. It's been great. A few of my friends rent, and compared to them, it's so much cheaper. Together, these personal stories help illustrate some of the wider problems with the UK housing market. For Professor Paul Cheshire of the LSE, the root cause is clear. We haven't built enough homes annually for more than a generation. And now, because either land prices have become so expensive or development sites so contentious, we struggle more than ever to build affordable housing. I fear the result, unfortunately, will continue to be repeated boom and busts. So, there you go, everyone. Let's have a bit of a talk about this one. So what do you think? Similar in many ways to Australia. The first example, the poor guy, 50% down. He should have just taken the loss and gotten away with these ongoing costs. Sometimes you've got to realize when to take a loss, particularly if you're buying, because property, it sucks money out of you. There's maintenance costs associated with it. So that's something you have to consider, everyone. And he didn't. The mother who doesn't understand why her daughter couldn't get into property when she got a special deal. The young couple who want to live where their parents live, but that area is not for them anymore. And the older couple who don't want the greenfield development. I mean, they're right. They haven't built enough houses. That's what it is. And it's because the government has stepped in and restricted where people can build. And the UK, their planning regimes, they're very restrictive over there. What do you think, everyone? What's the solution going to be? I don't know if they'll have the political will there. They need to fundamentally they need to open up more land. They just need to open up more land. That's what they have to do. They need to abandon some of these green buffers. As an architect, I'll be rolling in my grave by saying this, but if they want to bring this many people into the country, this is the price you pay. The young, and not just for the locals, for the the immigrants coming over too. They're all getting screwed together. Okay, anyone young is getting screwed because you haven't built up enough wealth to get into that. So it's going to just exacerbate the class divide. Maybe that's what they want. Maybe that's the real reason here. Crush the middle class in the UK. I don't think it's intentional. I think it's a bloody mess. Yeah. How they're going to fix it, we'll have to see. Maybe there'll be a political shift in the UK and they'll stop the population growth happening so much so the burden on the housing won't be exacerbated. And then they can just look at building what they can. What do you think, everyone? Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this one in the comments down below. Thank you all for watching. If you're a fan and enjoy the content I put together here, there are a few ways you can help out. You can join us on YouTube or Patreon. Sign up for SelfWealth or Stake. Use our affiliate links at Amazon, eBay, Independent Reserve, or AussieBroadband. You can buy our merch from HeiseSays, use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or support us via PayPal. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.